The year is 1970. It wasn't just another year, it was the culmination of a decade of immense transformation. In Japan, this was the year of Expo 70 in Osaka, the first World's Fair held in Asia. Its theme was progress and harmony for mankind, and it represented Japan's new face to the world. A nation risen from the ashes of war to become a technological and economic giant, a nation looking to the future with boundless hope and confidence. But beneath this gleaming surface of progress and prosperity, other currents were flowing. In universities and on the streets, a new generation, born after the war, was seething with anger and rebellion. They believed Japan's economic miracle had come at the cost of the nation's true spirit, turning it into a subordinate of American capitalism. From Paris to Berkeley, the spirit of revolution was sweeping the world's youth, and Japan was no exception. From the heart of this rebellion, radical leftist factions were born, dreaming of igniting a global revolution. In the midst of this contradictory world, between the dreams of the future and the anger of the present, on Tuesday, March 31, 1970, Tokyo International Airport was bustling with life, as usual. On board Japan Airlines Flight 351, a Boeing 727 nicknamed Yodogo, 122 passengers and 7 crew members were preparing for a short domestic flight to the city of Fukuoka. Among them were businessmen, families on their way to a spring holiday, and students returning home. None of them knew that 9 of their fellow passengers, ordinary-looking young men, were not ordinary travelers. They were soldiers in a war yet to be declared, and they carried with them weapons from a distant past to carry out one of the strangest and most audacious hijackings in history. 20 minutes after takeoff, the Yodogo reached its cruising altitude of 33,000 feet. The flight attendants began their service with their customary smiles. The calm was perfect. And then, precisely at 7:33 a.m., a sharp, sudden voice cut through the air. A slender young man rose from his seat in the front row. He was Takamaru Tamiya, a 27-year-old student and the group's mastermind. He raised his voice sharply, piercing the cabin's tranquility. "Do not move. Do not scream. We are the Japanese Red Army. This plane is now under our control." A moment of stunned silence followed, then whispers of fear spread like wildfire. Before the passengers could process what was happening, 8 other young men rose from their scattered seats, moving like actors on a well-rehearsed stage. They moved with speed and organization, taking control of the plane's aisles. But the real shock was not the hijacking itself, but the weapons they revealed. From under their coats, they produced not guns or rifles, but the cold gleam of traditional Japanese katana swords. Long, sharp blades, the legendary weapons of the samurai, looked as if a piece of history had violently invaded the technological present of the aircraft. In addition to the swords, each man carried metal pipes wrapped in tape, which they declared were high-explosive bombs. The scene was surreal. The symbol of feudal Japan, the samurai sword representing honor and death, was now being used as a tool of terror in the age of jet aircraft. The panic these swords induced was deeper than any firearm could have caused. It struck a sensitive chord in the Japanese psyche. Tamiya loudly declared their manifesto. "We are the vanguard of the world revolution. We are going to North Korea. We will train in guerrilla warfare under Comrade Kim Il-sung, and we will return as a true army to liberate our people from American imperialism and the corrupt capitalist system." Their demand wasn't for ransom money, but a one-way ticket to what they considered a workers' paradise, to transform themselves from angry students into revolutionary soldiers. For the hostages, this was the beginning of a journey into the unknown, a journey with an uncertain end. 2 of the hijackers stormed the cockpit. One placed the cold blade of the sword against co-pilot Tayasu Imei's neck, while the other aimed his supposed bomb at Captain Shinji Ishida. The orders were clear: change course now. Head north to Pyongyang. Here, in the midst of chaos and imminent danger, Captain Ishida's composure shone through. Instead of panicking, he began to think calmly. He looked at the instrument panel and told the hijackers with quiet firmness, "Sir, I understand your request, but look for yourself. This plane is designed for domestic flights. We do not have enough fuel to reach Pyongyang. We will fall out of the sky in the middle of the Sea of Japan." This was the truth, but it was also the opening move in a psychological chess game between the flight crew and the hijackers. After a tense argument, the captain convinced them that the only solution was to land and refuel. He suggested landing at Fukuoka Airport, their original destination, arguing it would be easier to get fuel there without raising major suspicions. The hijackers reluctantly agreed, but warned that any trickery would mean blowing up the plane. On the ground, Japan had woken up to shocking news. The government went on high alert. Prime Minister Isaku Sato formed a crisis cell. The initial instructions were clear: the hostages must be saved at all costs, and bloodshed must be avoided. When the Yodogo landed in Fukuoka, it was surrounded by hundreds of police officers. Long, arduous negotiations began, lasting for more than 7 hours. Negotiators tried to buy time and persuade the hijackers to abandon their plan, but the young men were determined and stubborn. In a rare humanitarian gesture, the hijackers allowed the release of 23 hostages, mostly crying women, terrified children, and the elderly. It was a moving moment, but it increased the anxiety of those who remained on board. After receiving food and water, the hijackers became more insistent on their demand: fuel, then a flight to North Korea. The Japanese authorities realized their options were rapidly narrowing. Facing this impasse, the Japanese government resorted to a plan that seemed straight out of a Hollywood movie. A plan so daring and risky it was almost unbelievable. Since the hijackers, young students, had never seen North Korea, they decided to bring North Korea to them. They codenamed the plan Operation Sakura, or Cherry Blossom. Throughout the night, hundreds of people worked in a race against time to transform a section of Fukuoka Airport into a fake version of Pyongyang's airport. Everything was changed. Police officers wore hastily tailored North Korean military uniforms. Workers covered Japanese signs with new ones written in Korean. Old black sedans were brought in to look like official cars in Pyongyang. A fake radio broadcast in Korean was prepared to sound like it was coming from Radio Pyongyang. Captain Ishida was secretly informed of the plan via radio. He was told to fly the plane on a very short trip, circle in the air, and then land at the same airport, but in the section prepared to look like North Korea. The plane took off again, its hostages unaware of the drama unfolding. After it landed, the hijackers looked out the windows. They saw soldiers in strange uniforms, Korean signs, and black cars. For a few moments it seemed the impossible ruse had worked. One of them even went down the stairs to talk to the Korean officials. But suspicion began to creep into their leader Tamiya's mind. He noticed the Korean soldiers looked extremely nervous. More importantly, there were no portraits of the leader Kim Il-sung, which should have been everywhere. Then he heard one of the officials speak with a clear English accent. The final blow came when a hijacker in the cockpit spotted a Northwest Orient Airlines plane in a distant part of the airport. "They tricked us. These aren't Koreans. We're still in Japan." The hijackers exploded with rage. They felt utterly humiliated. The atmosphere inside the plane returned to terror, even worse than before. Operation Cherry Blossom had failed spectacularly, and the fate of 106 people was now on the line. After the deception failed, the Japanese government had no cards left to play. In a state of desperation, they allowed the plane to be refueled and to depart. The Yodogo took off for the third time, this time into the true unknown. The plane crossed into South Korean airspace, where it was intercepted by South Korean fighter jets and forced to land at Gimpo International Airport in Seoul. Here, a new round of hell began, a complex diplomatic standoff between Japan and South Korea, and the continued captivity of hostages who were on the verge of collapse after 3 days of terror, hunger, and exhaustion. In Tokyo, one man felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders more than anyone else. He was Shinjiro Yamamura, Japan's Vice Minister of Transport. He saw the images of the weary hostages on television and felt a deep personal duty. In a decision that shook the Japanese nation, he took a heroic step that no government official had taken before. Yamamura announced that he would fly to Seoul and offer himself to the hijackers as a substitute hostage, in exchange for the release of all remaining passengers. It was a stunning offer. A high-ranking politician, a husband and a father, voluntarily offering his life to replace 100 people he did not know. Yamamura flew to Seoul. At first, the hijackers refused, believing it was another trick. But after long, intense negotiations and seeing the minister's seriousness, they agreed to the deal. The scene on the tarmac at Gimpo Airport was historic. The plane door opened, and the passengers began to descend one by one. On their faces was a mixture of tears, exhaustion, and disbelief. And walking in the opposite direction, Minister Yamamura ascended the stairs of the plane with steady, calm steps, entering the lion's den to take their place. He was now the sole hostage, along with the flight crew who had insisted on staying with their captain. With the passengers freed, on April 3rd, the Yodogo was finally allowed to take off on its final journey to its desired destination, Pyongyang. After landing in North Korea, the 9 hijackers surrendered to the local authorities, handing over their samurai swords that had terrorized the world, most of which turned out to be replicas, and the bombs, which were entirely fake. North Korea welcomed them as revolutionary heroes and granted them political asylum. A few days later, the crew and the courageous Minister Yamamura were allowed to return to Japan, where they received a massive national welcome. But the story didn't end there. For the hijackers, the end was just the beginning. What became of the Japanese Red Army in their communist paradise? Their lives in North Korea were far from the revolution they had dreamed of. They became tools in the North Korean propaganda machine. They worked translating Japanese films and writing articles glorifying the regime. They lived in an isolated compound under constant surveillance. Some married Japanese women who, it was later revealed, were among the citizens abducted by North Korea in other tragic cases. Over the years, some died of illness, while others were arrested attempting to secretly return to Japan and were sentenced to long prison terms. Today, a few of them still live there as old men, stuck in a foreign land, a pale shadow of the revolutionary youth they once were. The story of the Yodogo hijacking remains a unique tale about the clash between past and present, between naive idealism and harsh reality, and between terror and supreme courage. It is a reminder of an era when the world was different, an era when young people were willing to die for an idea, and a minister was willing to risk his life for his fellow citizens. A story stranger than fiction, because it really happened. Thank you for watching. If this story intrigued you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more deep and fascinating stories from the forgotten pages of history. We'll see you in the next video.